You guys know I'm always talking about tracking my money. You can't manage what you don't measure. And I use a paid app to do that because I'm kind of crazy. But when I talk to you guys, my readers and my listeners, you want a free solution. You want something that links to your personal accounts and tracks your net worth. You want something that has analysis tools and a personalized plan for you. And you want real wealth management advice. The free answer is personal capital. Personal capital is an awesome tool, and it is hard to believe that it's free. And the world agrees. Year after year, personal capital is recognized as a best in class budgeting and tracking tool. And that's why I feel good about being affiliated with them. So if you want to start getting your finances in order and you want to do it for free, start with personal capital. Here's how: go to the show notes, click on that link, and let them know that the best interest sent you, and start your free account today. That's Personal Capital, your all in one free personal finance tool.
Welcome to the Best Interest Podcast, hosted by Jesse Kramer, where we discuss today's best ideas in personal finance and investing. The Best Interest is a personal podcast meant for entertainment purposes only. It should not be taken as financial advice and is not prescriptive of your financial situation. Here's your host, Jesse Kramer.
Hey guys, welcome to episode 35 of the Best Interest Podcast. My name is Jesse Kramer, and my guests today are Allie and Josh, better known as the FI couple. Now, if you are interested in real estate investing, in retiring early, or maybe even in incorporating investing into your long-term relationships, then this is a great episode for you. But real quick, before I introduce our guest, could you please pause the show and then in your podcast app, give a rating and review to the Best Interest Podcast? Why? Because the Best Interest, it's a growing small business, and I want to keep making this content for people just like you. A rating and a review, it lets all those fancy algorithms know that you care about this podcast. And I know I'm asking for your time, I'm asking for your effort, and I know that you don't owe me anything. So I really appreciate those of you who decide to sacrifice that time and effort to leave that rating and review. Thank you guys. So with that, let's go meet our guest. My guests today, they are a young couple who are documenting their journey to financial independence with a particular focus on real estate investing and index fund investing. And you can find them sharing their message with tens of thousands of followers on Instagram and Twitter. And today, they came to share with us. So I am honored to welcome Allie and Josh, better known as the FI couple, onto the Best Interest Podcast. Hey guys, how you doing?
Doing so good. We're so excited to be here with you tonight and to finally connect face to face.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for coming here. Well, real quick, for the listeners who aren't familiar with your story, I figure a great place to start is with just a little intro about who you are. It can be even as fun as, how you guys met, how you guys became a couple of the FI couple, and then especially kind of what your money journey has been like and how it got you to where you are today.
Yeah, absolutely. So Josh and I met at state school in New York. He was the cute guy from class that walked me home one day after class, and we have been pretty inseparable ever since. We started our marriage in 2018 with over $100,000 in student loans. We really didn't talk about money a lot. We weren't super financially literate in terms of like savvy with personal finance. But a lot happened in 2018 that kind of catapulted that self education.
Yeah, so I mean, I was unexpectedly laid off from a long-term job, and that was also the year of our wedding. And kind of leading up to that, we had both been working really, really hard in our jobs. And kind of the year before our wedding, we weren't really seeing each other as much as we would really have liked. And so we were kind of like reflecting one day of like, well, if we're getting ready to get married, but we're not really spending a whole lot of time together, like, what can we do differently so that we have more time to spend together.
And I think having Josh getting laid off, it was one of those fork in the road moments where it's like, what
Hmm.
can we do differently? And what are we not liking in our life? And for us, it was we are strapped with debt, and the modest salaries that we're making are not going to cut it to pay it off on the timeline we want. So, first, it was discovering Dave Ramsey. Then it was, bigger pockets, real estate investing, and it kind of catapulted, snowballed from there. And we became totally obsessed. So, long story short, that's kind of the gist of it.
Yeah.
So you mentioned bigger pockets right there. Now, Dave Ramsey is probably fairly well known. We've actually talked about him before recently here on the podcast. For those who don't know, what is bigger pockets?
Yeah, so I always joke that Bigger Pockets is like the Google for real estate. So it's the largest real estate educational platform, I think, in the world, at the very least in the United States. So, but it's an online educational resource for anyone who's looking to start, what is real estate investing, kind of beginners all the way to like, how can I buy $100 million worth of real estate and everything in between. And so, along with having online resources, they've also have probably about a dozen or so books that were published. And the more that we started talking about kind of like real estate and financial independence, the more it seemed like real estate was going to have to be the way that we went, because neither one of us are necessarily, lucrative careers. And we still had $100,000 in student loans, so we had to figure out a way to make more money while also spending less money. And real estate was that solution for us.
So let's get into the real estate because I do have a few questions about your real estate ventures. And one of the first ones, only because I've seen you talking about it before, and I think it's a really cool idea, is it's so-called house hacking, right? So correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that you guys either were or still are house hacking, and that was one of the first real estate moves you made. So explain to us what exactly is house hacking and how did it help you out?
House hacking is amazing, and in our opinion, it is one of the best ways that you can kind of dip your toe into the real estate investing waters. So, with house hacking, you're either going to buy a single family home or a multifamily home, but it is going to be your primary residence for at least a year. And because you move into the home, you qualify for a low down payment owner occupant loan. You can get 0% if you're a VA, 3.5% for an FHA, or 5% for a conventional. So you're putting very little money down and you're moving into a house. Now, if you buy a single family home, you would rent out the bedrooms, and that rent would cover most of or all of the mortgage. So you're essentially living for cheap or free. Now, if you buy a multifamily home like we did, we bought a duplex, we moved into one of the apartments, and then we had a tenant in the other apartment, and his rent covered half of the mortgage. In the beginning, this made us go from paying $1,400 a month in rent to about $600 in new rent, which was just our mortgage. But we've actually house hacked twice. So now we live completely for free. We don't pay anything. So it's really cool.
So let me see if I get this straight. So you were living in an apartment where your rent was around 13 or 1400, and that rent kind of disappears, right? That is money that you're spending that you never see anything back from. In your first house hack, there's someone living on the other side of the wall from you, which let's be honest, it does have some downsides,
Oh yeah.
but the upside is that your new rent is only 600, and of that 600, some of that I assume is actually equity that
Mhm.
you would eventually see back, correct?
You got
Yes.
it.
So at
Okay.
the beginning of your mortgage term, it's mostly paying off interest, but eventually it gets to this interesting point where it's mostly principal pay down and you are paying down the mortgage.
Yeah, and so what was cool too, again, like, so I mean, Allie was working full time in her career. I got laid off, so I was kind of in between jobs. I took a job. I was driving for Uber. I was doing all types of things, and all the while, I was also learning about real estate. And so, we at the moment we weren't sure like how can we really grow our income. But once we discovered the power of house hacking, we knew that if we could take our, even if we just cut our rent in half from say 1,300 down to like 600 or 650. If you took that $600 over the course of a year, that's over $7,000. after tax that was now going back into our pockets.
Because housing is pretty much usually the most expensive line item in someone's budget. So we were pretty much able to completely eliminate that through house hacking.
Wow. Okay. So just for my own education and maybe some people out there are curious. So how long did you live in that first house? And then when you transitioned into a second house where you're doing something similar, I guess what was the living situation in that second house? And my final question is, does that mean that you retained ownership of the first house after moving to the second one?
Yeah, so we moved into the first house hack. Actually, it was like the week of Christmas, 2018.
Mhm.
Moved in, and then really the whole purpose of that was we just wanted to pay off student loans as fast as possible. So we closed on the property, moved in, and then most of 2019, we honestly just focused on paying off student loans and really learning real estate and kind of building systems. And so we continued to live in the property all of 2019. And then actually last year, in September of 2020, we closed on our second house hack, which is where we are right now. It's also a duplex. So when we moved out of the first house, we rented our old apartment. And so now both of those units are rented. So they completely cover the mortgage, taxes, insurance. We put money aside for maintenance. And then the cash flow from that property covers our portion of the mortgage down here at our second house hack.
So we lived in the first property for a year and a half, and the second property, we're coming up on a year of
That's
living
crazy.
here. So pretty crazy,
Yeah.
yeah.
Are there any are there any sort of tax implications that people should know about? I mean, so it sounds like with your first house, because you were there as primary residence,
Yeah.
it was just like my primary residence, even though I don't have any tenants. But now that you're not living there anymore, does it get treated more along the lines of a business sort of tax scheme, or how does that work?
It's pretty cool because once you don't live there and it's not your primary residence, you're able to write off any capital expenditures or improvements that you're making on the property. So when we hire different companies to do improvements or we have expenses, we are able to write that off with our accountant.
Yep. And then just anything that goes into the operation of the property. So taxes, insurance. We do have PMI because we use less than 20% down. That's private mortgage insurance. Any maintenance costs. We had a leaky ceiling we had to repair at one point. And then what's really cool is, and this is kind of like a unique to real estate thing, there's what's called depreciation. Now, normally, depreciation kind of has like a negative connotation. It's like, oh, like something you own something and it's going down in value. In the realm of real estate, depreciation is really just for tax purposes. It's almost kind of like a gift the IRS gives to a real estate investor, and they take your property and over the span of a certain number of years, they say this is what we think your property would depreciate by every single year. It's what's called a paper loss, right? And so it's often several thousands of dollars that is also now a tax deduction. Our property is not going down in value. It's just the way the IRS kind of reconciles with something that's you're owning longer, and so naturally there has to be some breakdown that goes into it.
Right. That does make sense. So the overall value of the property isn't going down. But if you were to take a picture of the house year over year and
Yep.
you guys didn't do any maintenance on it, you would see it slowly decaying, right? And the government recognizes that there's some loss of value there. And that's the depreciation.
And
Is that
oh, sorry.
no, go ahead, Allie. Go ahead.
I was going to say, and here in New York, we are living in 120 plus year old homes.
Yeah.
So, I think we were a little scared of living in old homes at first, all the things that could go wrong. But we joke now, like if it's still standing after 120 years, it's not too bad.
Yeah, I can totally relate. I'm also I'm in Western New York. I'm in Rochester.
Oh,
Okay.
And
cool.
my house is built in the 30s, I think 1930s. So it's coming up on 90 or so years. And there's some parts that are definitely showing it, but on the whole, it's a good house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. They built them different back then.
Yeah, yeah, that's for sure. I wanted to go back, guys, and talk a little bit more about the specific finances. Now, you mentioned your accountant. You've mentioned, I think you mentioned an accountant, or you at the very least you mentioned kind of different things you can deduct tax wise. And one thing that I've always felt a little unsure about when it came to being a real estate investor is, am I getting in over my head when it comes to the finances? Am I going to miss out on some obvious tax loophole and shoot myself in the foot? So what's been your experience with that? Have you hired a professional? Do you handle most of it yourself? Is this a lot of the stuff that you guys learned, back in 2018 from bigger pockets that now you feel like seasoned pros?
When Josh and I first started investing in real estate, I think we both had the misconception that we had to be experts in every single area. And I think that that misconception prevents a lot of people from getting in the game because they think they're not prepared. They need to know everything. It's very overwhelming. Josh and I are really big on focusing on our strengths and leaning into those. And any areas where we feel like we're not really expert, we hire out competent professionals that can do the job well. So, in terms of taxes, we know what we need to know, but we leave the rest to our CPA. I'm going to do some nice cosmetic renovations in my home, but if I have electrical work that needs to be done, I'm hiring my electrician. I don't want to get electrocuted today, So I think there hasn't been any issues for us because we treat our rental properties like a business that they are, and we delegate responsibilities to members of our team.
I would say the one thing that was kind of a blind spot a little bit for us in the beginning was bookkeeping.
Mm.
Prior to investing in real estate, I mean, we just did like TurboTax. Our tax situation was actually pretty simple.
Hmm.
So there wasn't a whole lot of record keeping. So luckily, we've been fortunate to have a great CPA who kind of walked us through everything that we would need to do. And he kind of taught us these are the forms I'll need to see to make my life easier, which makes your life easier.
Tracking all your expenses, different things like that. So.
And now there's a lot of systems online that make it that much easier. And so we just keep all of our receipts, we scan them, we upload them, and then come tax season, he does his magic.
Excellent. And out of curiosity, is that CPA, does he have a real estate specialty, or is he just a generic CPA and all generic CPAs know enough to handle a real estate investor's taxes?
I want to say yes. I feel like competent CPAs should be able to, but I will say that Josh and I are a bit biased with all of the professionals that we use, whether it's a real estate agent, a CPA, an attorney. We really like investor friendly fill in the blank. So our CPA is an investor himself. He flips homes, like he kind of really gets it. Our
Hmm.
attorney actually is an investor. So we use our network to find people that really understand what we are doing in real estate because we want to be able to take advantage of any tax incentive that we can.
All right, guys. Well, one more money question, if I may ask. I'm really curious what kind of time commitment and what kind of financial commitment has been involved over the lifespan of your properties. And maybe, we can talk about what you're putting in, but then also what you're getting out when it comes to cash flow.
So I'll start here in saying that when Josh and I first started investing in real estate, we had very little capital to invest. I mean, we had a couple $1,000 in our savings. We scraped together every dollar that we got from our wedding. We didn't go on a honeymoon and we bought a duplex instead. So for our first duplex, we put 5% down. The property was $155,000. We're in the capital region of New York. I know that number is going to sound funny depending on what state you're coming from. Which all in all, what was our total out of pocket for your down payment and closing costs?
14,200.
Josh is good with numbers. So
Okay.
that was our out of pocket with the property. Beyond that, we did have to invest some money into that property, but it's kind of not a
Yeah,
whole
we
lot, I
put
don't think.
so because when we bought the property, there was a tenant already there, and he was paying below market rent, which was fine because we were just excited to have a property and have a tenant.
Hmm.
I remember January 1st, he gave us a check for like $750, and I was like, "This is crazy." And so he about a year later, so he moved out. So we put about $3,000 into that apartment, I should
To make
say.
it nicer, we did some improvements.
And so yeah, and then we got a new tenant in there. We got about $175 a month more in rent, which then further lowered our monthly payment.
But with that property, it was pretty turnkey. And that's a phrase you'll hear a lot in real estate investing. Turnkey means you can move in, you don't really have to do anything, it's in great condition. So I would say that first year of real estate investing, and with that first property in general, our time output was a couple hours a week. Like, I really felt like our time output was when our tenant would knock on our door to hand us a rent check because he didn't understand electronic rent systems. And like, I talked to him for like 15 minutes. So I really feel like that was our biggest time output.
Yeah.
Now, with our second property, it was very different.
Yeah.
We used a 3.5% FHA loan. Our total out of pocket for this property at 150 was
13,200 to close.
to close. So that's your
Okay.
3.5% down plus your closing costs. In New York State, you're paying taxes, so the closing costs are like double your down payment.
Hmm.
So with this property, it was in rougher shape. We got it at a great deal, but we had, probably about close to $15,000 to $20,000 in improvements that we needed to make. So this property was not turnkey. So because of that, I would say our time output for this one and our money output has been a bit more, because typically when you buy a property, you're in like that stabilization phase where you want to get the property running smoothly, everything's good and working good. We are after a year at the tail end of that. So I'm noticing our time output. It comes in waves, but it's kind of decreasing.
Yeah, I mean, in the beginning, it was, I mean, every single day, we were working on something both expected and unexpectedly, while also now kind of getting accustomed to managing a property that we didn't live in because we rented out our other one. And so, yeah, I mean, a year later now, relatively speaking, knock on wood, it's going pretty smoothly, and it's back to that like 1 to 2 hour a week thing. But in the beginning, it was a lot of work.
So you often hear the phrase like real estate investing is passive. You should do it. It's not passive. Some months it's more passive, but it is an active investment. It has great returns, but it is not passive. Some months are more active than others. It really varies. So you're in for an adventure if you invest in real estate.
Yeah.
Speaking of adventures, so it sounds like the second property was more of an adventure and potentially more of a risk, right? If I'm talking brass tacks, risk reward, the fact that you guys were going into a property that you knew you would have to put money into is definitely sounds more risky than your first turnkey property. So maybe, what kind of mindset did you have going into the second property that maybe wasn't there for the first one? Or did you feel like your first property gave you the experience needed to tackle this second one?
Yeah, I would say our first property like spoiled us. We didn't think like, well, you could live for a lot cheaper and still really love the space that you were in, and we found that that was our first property.
It was beautiful.
It was, yeah, it was basically a house, and it just so happened to have an apartment. It was
Mhm.
magical. So our second property though, yeah. So I mean, we had about a year and a half of experience in our, under our belts, if you will. Our goal going in all the time, like I said before, was we had 102,000, and we no longer wanted to have student loans. So we were excited to be paying down. I think we got down to like $400 a month at the first property, but our goal was always zero. We
Live
don't
for free.
live for free. And so this property, it was an off-market deal we made through a relationship in the community. Um, I think admittedly, I think we underestimated the amount of work that was going to be needed. We had a baseline idea, but then kind of once we got in and really started opening things up, I think it ended up kind of ballooning on us a little bit.
I think we felt experienced, and I think we were a little naive because our first house hack was so easy. We were like, let's do it again. This is great. And this house hack, like, I think the first 3 months I cried every day, and I was
Yeah.
like, we ruined our life here. Like, it was really, really stressful and overwhelming. But now looking back on everything, we are such better investors. We've gotten such
100%.
experience. When things break now, I don't cry. I'm just like, okay, what do I need to do? So, all of that challenge really made us better in a lot of ways.
And sometimes like that's like the catch 22. Like there's an expression I like, if you know Jocko Willink at all, he says embrace the suck. And like it's not always fun to like do hard things, but it's the hard things that are actually going to make you way better. And now, yeah, I feel like a way more competent real estate investor because of the hard stuff that we had to go through.
I mean, it totally is a catch 22. And the way you guys explained it, it makes perfect sense how challenging it would be going through it. And then potentially I can only think of going through it and kind of having those like, oh shit moments and feeling a little regret myself. But then when you're on the other side and you realize how you've grown from it, whether it's your actual, kind of mechanical skills of fixing things up, or
Mhm.
whether it's maybe what you want to look at next time in a property and some of those investing lessons, like that is where the money is made, right? That's where the bread gets buttered and the real value is.
Yeah, no, I love that. And yeah, it is. It was like we went to school of real estate and we paid probably about $15,000 to learn a lot more than we had ever known. Uh,
Yeah.
and now we're better investors because of it. But what I will say too, what's kind of cool about real estate is, so I mean, we bought the property for 150,000, and day one, I mean, we knew we were getting a decent deal, but it appraised for 168,000, and this was before we had put any of the work into it. So right now it's probably about 178, 180,000, depending on, who you talk to. So sometimes with real estate, you have what's called forced appreciation. So there's natural appreciation just from market conditions. And then you, as the investor, can actually make the property worth more because it can now produce more based on the work you did.
Gotcha. So that would just mean you guys put in a better kitchen, or you guys made it a finished basement, and therefore the home is worth more, or at the very least you can rent it out for more.
Both.
Both. Yeah.
Both. Okay.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Very interesting. So that's something I've been thinking about. The property that I'm talking to you from right now is my personal property that my girlfriend and I might end up moving out of in the near future. We'll see. And one question I've had for myself is, what money do I put into this property with the expectation that I'll get it back out when I sell? You
Yeah.
know, and then so I'm thinking about, for example, upgrading the bathroom, because I think that might be something that is truly value added. It's a pretty small bathroom. It's like a Harry Potter closet. So I think if I expand that, it might actually help the place rent out a little bit better.
So a lot of times, I mean, you could take some of the guesswork out of it too. So like if you go on like Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist or Zillow and stuff like that, and there's neighboring homes like single family, similar layout and stuff like that, and they're for rent, you can kind of gauge, okay, well, like this is our home as is. These are the homes. This is kind of our competition, if you will. How does our home compare? Because sometimes what people do kind of get into trouble is they, without kind of doing that market analysis, they put a bunch of money in thinking like, nice, we're going to totally recoup this. And then
Hmm.
they like over renovate kind of thing. Whereas as is, it might be ready to go.
Like as an example, with our neighborhood that we live in a nice neighborhood. It's not bougie, it's a working class neighborhood, it's a safe, affordable community. And you could really get carried away with renovations. You could do granite countertops and put in hardwood floors and all of these things. I know that based on market rents in my neighborhood, I would never make my money back if I put all of those
No.
fancy finishes in, because you just can't charge that where we live. So I think it's really important to do your analysis, because you might look at properties in your neighborhood and yours is the nicest one, and you're like, oh, I can just actually do it as is,
As
and I
is.
probably could get some great tenants. So yeah, we'll talk when you get to that point. Let's work together on that
Yeah,
one.
very interesting. And it does actually make me wonder, like, what kind of thought process you guys put into setting your prices? Do you try to meet what the market rate is in your area, or I've heard some people say they actually try to they charge a little bit above market rates, almost to project this message that my property is a little bit nicer than average. What do you guys think about that?
That's actually very interesting to hear that. We have a very, very involved process and analysis that I'm not going to bore you with, but we
Okay.
spend a lot of time making sure that we are appropriate with our rent. We use a lot of different resources. We go on Facebook, as Josh said, Zillow, Rentometer is another app that you can use. So we go on multiple sites to kind of look at comparable apartments. But then after that, we really like to not charge the tippy top of the
Mhm.
market or above. We like to come in a little lower or at market rent, or maybe a touch lower. And the reason for that is because if you're charging the very, very top, you need to have a great reason about why you're charging it. And in today's day and age, you have all of these massive luxury apartment complexes that are offering a gym and snow removal and grant, everything. And we are not that. We are the small potato landlords. We own a couple duplexes and we offer a lot of great amenities, but we're not that. So when you charge a little below that tippy top, I think it actually helps with tenant retention. People want to stay there longer because they feel like they're getting a good deal. Anything else you want to add?
Yeah, well, I think sometimes like the hidden cost, like you talk about like financing, like the hidden cost and finance is inflation. In real estate, it's vacancy. And I think sometimes people get overzealous sometimes thinking like, oh, well, I'll get the top market rent. Well, every single month that that property is not rented, that is however many dollars every single month you're not collecting. And unless you have a really, really big portfolio, I mean, if you go 2 months without rent, that could be an entire year worth of cash flow right there.
We
Right.
actually have friends and coaching clients that we've worked with that have priced their apartments too high. And some of them, they've been without tenants for like 3 or 4 months. And then we talk to them and we do an analysis with them. And we're like, your apartment is $200 too high, or whatever the number is.
Mm.
And they bring it to the number that makes more sense and they get dozens of applicants. So the number really could impact you a lot. So that's why it's important to have that forethought.
Gotcha. That's really cool. I mean, that is I'm a bit of an economics nerd, and that is a supply and demand pricing model example right there, right?
Yeah.
If your price is too high, then the demand at that price is going to be low, and no one's gonna eat up your supply. So you have to lower
Right.
the price to make that supply and demand meet.
Yeah,
Um,
our big thing too is like we like the idea of if someone was living somewhere else and they wanted to kind of like work upwards towards something like that, what we own, we have a spot for them. Or we've also had tenants who came from very, very high or more expensive apartments and they wanted something to work down, but it's still like a safe, clean neighborhood. And we can kind of acquiesce depending on
Or
where
that
people are coming from. The
Goldilocks.
Goldilocks apartments.
right. Excellent. And one thing you touched on there that is a huge point, at least from my point of view. You said, vacancy is your worst enemy,
Yeah.
one of the worst enemies, because I just did a quick math, right? So if you lose 2 months of rent on vacancy out of a year, 2 out of 12 months, you're losing 17% of your revenue.
Yep.
And on any sort of investment, if you're losing 17% of your return from somewhere, that might be all the profit and then some for that year. So that is huge. So I can see how tenant retention is kind of paramount in your minds.
Crucial. Yeah, yeah, and we spend a lot of time not only in terms of the pricing of our apartments, but we also spend a lot of time being, I would say, very hands-on landlords. What's nice about being a small potato landlords and buying properties in close proximity is that, relatively speaking, if a tenant has a question or concern, we can act on that very quickly. And a lot of times, tenants, when they come to us and we kind of screen them, they tell us the experience that they had with their prior landlord, and we do our best to not replicate that.
Gotcha. A couple things you've said, I've got some little questions that I thought might be interesting. So the one, now that you have two houses, am I safe in assuming that you guys have 30-year mortgages on those houses, or what do your mortgages look like?
Yep, we have 30-year fixed mortgages. The first, Josh knows all the numbers. I don't even try to memorize them. What's the APR for both of them?
Yeah, so the first one was 487. That one we bought in end of 2018, where rates were a little bit higher.
Hmm.
This one that we're in right now, we just closed. Well, not just closed, but
Oh,
last year,
yeah.
we bought it at 2.7%.
Okay. And then 30-year, I mean, it makes sense to me on its face. The idea is that you want to keep your costs lower so that your cash flow stays positive. So a 15-year mortgage doesn't really make sense just because it makes it harder to be cash flow positive. Is that the thinking?
Yeah,
That's exactly it. Yeah. And also, you really want your tenants to be paying off your asset for you. You make that initial investment on the actual down payment and closing costs. And then, of course, if any improvements need to be made, you're doing that. But really, the goal of this is that you have renters, and every month they pay that rent, and eventually the principal is paid down in 30 years, and you own a property free and clear.
and for us too, sometimes I refer to it as like knowing which inning of the game you're in. So right now we are very comfortable taking on leverage in the form of a mortgage. because by doing so, it allows us to have higher cash flow, which then covers more of our cost of living,
And our student loans.
which keeps more of our
Mhm.
money in our pockets, which then expedites the process of saving up for down payments. Eventually, and we're probably not that far off right now from where we want our kind of final portfolio to be, if you will. Once we're kind of at that point, we're not opposed to, even if it's just one mortgage, kind of like rental debt snowballing that, if you will, getting that at least paid off, which then it's kind of like you going from offense to defense a little bit. That will boost the cash flow because the principal interest is now gone, which covers more of our cost of living. But that's really once our portfolio is where we want it to be. But right now, we're just 30-year mortgages and we're letting other people pay off the houses.
And rental debt snowball, for those that don't know, is where you take the cash flow from every property and you kind of lump it together every month and throw extra payments at your principal for one property. So technically, your rents and your tenants' rent money is still paying off that mortgage. It's not necessarily your money out of pocket. So then you own a property with no mortgage.
Gotcha. Very cool. And I could see how over time these decisions, meaning, the 30-year mortgage decision or the rental debt snowball decisions, over time they're going to compound to the point that's allow you, if you wanted to, you could essentially build your empire more quickly. Then right, if you do a 15-year mortgage, actually more money is leaving your pocket every month in the form of mortgage payments, which means you can't save up that money for the next down payment on the next house.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, I think so. Our just an idea of like the snowball effect. It took us about a year to save up, probably actually a little bit longer to save up for our first investment property, and we needed a little bit of help from family.
Hmm.
It took us probably about 6 months to save up for our second property, and it just continues to compound and get faster and faster, just as our properties continue to perform, as our incomes continue to steadily rise, and then our expenses they haven't really gone lower, but the income, our expenses haven't really gone up either.
Yeah. Yeah. Out of curiosity, and you don't have to answer if you don't want to. I know a lot can change over time, but what are your long-term aspirations with real estate investing? I mean, do you have 5 house, 10 house, or is the sky the limit?
As of right now, well, our first phase of real estate investing was that we wanted enough apartments to pay the mortgage of a single family home. So for us, that looks like probably 6 units or three duplexes. So our first phase, we want to get one more property, and the cash flow from all three of those properties will pay the mortgage for our own primary residence. But I think like the next phase of that is probably like 10 units, 12 units. We'll see how that feels and if that feels good, but that's kind of our plan for now. We don't have ambitious goals of owning hundreds of units. I don't think that's us and that will ever be us. But those are kind of our goals for now.
Very cool. It makes a lot of sense to me. I would probably be in the same boat for what it's worth. I think it'd be great to have that not passive, as we said earlier, but semi-passive income that's kind of paying some of the bills. But I don't think I'd want maybe the stress that would come with a large real estate empire.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, no, that's not really our jam. I mean, our whole thing, like Ali was saying before, is like so we're not like some people like love real estate and they're all about real estate. I mean, we like real estate because of what it does for us from an economic standpoint. But if you showed us an investment tomorrow that was like this will give you way better returns, that's where our money's going. So right now, we haven't found anything to necessarily beat it in terms of our goals. But we also on the side in conjunction with real estate, we're also building our index fund portfolio. And we want to try to have as many legs under our financial table as possible so that if one day we're like, you know what, forget about this whole real estate thing, we have 3 or 4 other income streams that can support us.
Very nice. Let's talk about that for a couple minutes. So your index fund portfolio, just out of curiosity, do you take advantage of like tax advantaged accounts, or kind of where are your index fund investments being made, and then which index funds are you choosing to invest into?
Yeah, so we both tax advantage and non-tax advantage. So we have a Roth IRA, and then we have a taxable brokerage account. And so both of which, well, actually, the Roth IRA is comprised of the S&P 500. So we use Vanguard's, and it's actually It's not an index fund technically; it's an exchange traded fund.
Yep. Okay.
Um, so it's VOO, the Vanguard S&P 500, and it's entirely S&P 500. And then in our taxable brokerage, it's 100% VTI, which is the Vanguard Total Stock Market Index Fund, which is basically you own a share in every publicly traded company in the United States. So in essence, you own the entire economy. And those are the two funds that we own.
Excellent. Excellent. I can support both those funds. And we've talked about index funds a lot here on the Best Interest podcast. And I think VU and VTI have come up before, but if not, the idea of total market US funds or large cap S&P funds have come up before. Terrific investments. One more. This is a fun question, guys. Before we get into the classic rapid fire questions, I did have one note I took, and I'm looking over here on the side because this is where I keep my notes. So you mentioned that you didn't go on a honeymoon, which is a very pragmatic choice to help you save for this first house. But my two-part question is, have you done something since that's been like a honeymoon? Or if not, where would you eventually take your honeymoon? Where would you go?
Great question. So we got married. We went on a mini moon. We did a little
Weekend.
weekend away in Cape Ann, Massachusetts, which is north of Cape Cod. It was really nice. But then a year later, actually, like on the anniversary of our wedding, we did a 2.5 week road trip out in California. We saw the redwoods. We went hiking in Yosemite. We went to all your classic, touristy stops up and down the coast, lots of outdoorsy adventure stuff. And the coolest thing about it is that we were able to pay for the trip in cash from all of the money that we saved house hacking.
Yep.
So we kind of like cash flowed our honeymoon. So pretty cool and definitely worth the wait.
If we had just, kind of didn't delay that gratification, we probably would have came back with a ton of debt, and we were new real estate investors. So we were really, really excited, but we wanted to do it in a way that aligned with what we were trying to accomplish. And it made it that much better to have a wonderful experience and not come back with a butt ton of debt.
All right, guys. Rapid fire question time. And feel free, you can take these one on one, or you can answer together. Totally up to you. The first one, though, is a way that I do my Christmas shopping. It's what was the last material object or personal luxury that you spent $100 or more on?
I just bought a pair of Birkenstock sandals today.
Oh wow. Okay. Yeah.
But I didn't tell Josh, and we normally tell each other about 100 or
That's
more
our threshold.
purchases.
Yeah. No,
So I'm telling you.
I got an iPad off of Facebook Marketplace about a month and a half ago. Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, this can also serve as the best interest confessional. So feel free, we can. This is a safe environment to talk about our purchases. Money is a topic.
That's right.
Those are both awesome purchases, right? Nice sandals, very important.
Mhm.
iPad, very cool. I'm
Yep.
talking to you guys through a MacBook that I got probably 3 months ago now, and it's so cool. I should have owned one much longer ago. All right, next question. What's a good habit that you're trying to form or a bad habit that you're trying to break?
So my big thing is getting back into fitness.
Mm.
So I have been a lifelong athlete, played multiple sports and part of a lot of recreational leagues, but I've pretty much been fairly sedentary for about a year and a half or so, minus like the occasional Planet Fitness excursion. So really trying to get back into the swing of things of just like overall fitness.
I think it's been hard with COVID because I think with all the craziness going on, I think we had a pretty consistent routine prior to COVID. But I feel like we never fully got out of it or back into it rather. So I'd agree with that for sure.
Gotcha. Here. Same
Yeah.
old story on my end. Next one. What's your favorite financial tool or app or service that you use, and why do you like it?
Oh man. So I'll give you two for me. So I really, really like Personal Capital as far as tracking our finances. It's just a nice one-stop shop. It kind of aggregates all the data and it gives you a nice kind of breakdown of this is your spending every single month, this is your net worth, this is how everything's going. So I really, really like that. And then kind of like the running joke of our house is like the most popular app on my phone is the calculator. Because
You're always on the
I am
calculator.
always running numbers, whether it's a rental property, prospective rental property, ROI, a stock, index, you name it. I'm always running numbers pretty much nonstop. So the calculator app on my phone.
So, because Josh shared our favorite personal finance app, I'm going to go a little out of the box with this one. And during the peak of COVID, before we made the Phi Couple, we watched the documentary called The Social Dilemma on Netflix. If you watched it, it's like very thought provoking and depresses you a little. So we watched it. And then I went on my personal Instagram account, and I'm following tons of different influencers, accounts, whatever. Mostly people that make me want to spend my money on clothes, or I feel bad after looking at them because I'm like, wow, they're like such an Instagram model, right? So I decided that I didn't want to be a consumer of things that were not fulfilling me and making me feel better about myself or helping improve me in some way. So I started following educational platforms, and I think my favorite personal finance app for us is Instagram, because I think there is such incredible knowledge and resources and people and community on Instagram. And we learn so much every day from experts in different fields. So I feel like we surround ourselves with such an awesome personal finance community on Instagram. I think it just like, when you surround yourself with people that get it, it forces you to level up. And I think it has really forced us to level up in so many different ways.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
That's an awesome answer. And we're going to come back to Instagram in a few seconds because I think after this podcast, a lot of people are going to want to connect with you guys on Instagram. And we'll talk about how they can do that. But real quick, before one more question, I will say I did not tell these guys that the podcast is sponsored by Personal Capital. So, Josh, thank you for the excellent advertising. Folks, if you want to sign up for Personal Capital, hit up that link in the show notes.
Oh, that's cool.
It's a good app. It is a good app. Josh and Allie agree. So one last question before we get to the important, how do people contact you? The last rapid fire question is, if I gave you guys a billboard and you could share any message with the world, what would you say?
Do good to others. That's honestly, that's my number one thing. And whether it's the Phi Couple or just like in my personal life, I think a lot of times we're like, oh man, like how can I change the world? And that's like a really, really daunting thing. I think sometimes we underestimate how impactful just a small act of kindness can have on like a person's life. And you never know like how much they needed that nice gesture, whatever it is. So I would just say like do kind things to others just because it's the nice thing to do.
I would say something different, but I agree with that. I don't think
Okay.
that's a bad one.
Right.
We talk a lot about like our why and why we're doing everything, and it's because like our time is finite. It's the most precious commodity in the world. So it is, I don't know if that's what my billboard would say, but something along that effect of, are you living the life you want to live? Are you spending your time the way you want to spend it? And if you're not, what do you need to do it differently? For us, we are aggressively paying down debt and investing so that we can quit our 9 to 5s and have more time with each other and the people that we love. So I think it's a great thing to do.
Yeah.
I love both those billboards. I would honk at those billboards as I went by. Well, thank you guys so much for coming on the podcast. And as I alluded to a couple minutes ago, people are going to want to reach out to you. How can they do so?
So you can pretty much find us on most social media platforms. On Instagram, we are at the FI Couple. We have a Twitter, the Phi Couple. And is that it?
Well, we also have a website.
We have a website, www.thephiCouple.com.
Yeah, no, and honestly, we try to be as responsive as possible. So if people have questions, feel free to shoot us a DM or an email, info@thephiCouple.com. We talked a lot today about real estate. That's something we are very passionate about, and specifically house hacking. So passionate about that we decided to write a book on that topic. And so it's all the information we wish we knew when we first started buying real estate. And so we put that into an ebook. So if you go to our Instagram, it's right in our bio, and we'd love to hear your reviews.
Excellent. And after everything you guys have kind of enlightened me and us with today, I can tell that book is going to be chock full of knowledge. So very cool. Allie and Josh, thank you so much for coming on to the Best Interest Podcast.
Thank you so much. It's been so much fun.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a pleasure.
Huge shout out to the FI couple. Thank you guys for coming on to the Best Interest Podcast. And if you want to get a hold of Allie and Josh, the FI couple, I've included all of their links in the show notes. If you want to reach out to me, my email is jesse@bestinterest.blog. You can follow me on Twitter, where my username is bestinterest_JC, or you can follow me on Instagram, where my username is thebestinterestjc. If you find this content valuable and you want to give back, there are 3 easy, free options for you. The first one, subscribe to this podcast via the app you're listening to right now. And the second and third options are to leave a rating and leave a review of the Best Interest Podcast. Tell me what you think. I love hearing back from you guys. We can continue to invest in one another because, as Ben Franklin said, an investment in knowledge pays the best interest. Sharing with others is investing in their knowledge. So thank you all for listening to this episode number 35 of the Best Interest Podcast. That is so cool. That is so cool. All right. All right. Time for, well, actually,
I'm sorry. You just
was
said
it
that
butt ton of debt?
ton of debt. What the F is that?
So no, I have like all these.
Were you trying to say a shit ton, but you were making it appropriate?
No, I have all these
I've
little.
never heard you say butt ton.
Yeah, I say butt ton. I say eager beaver. I say,
Like, don't say butt ton. That needs to end.
yeah, I don't. It's not a.
I'm sorry.
Just so you guys know, I usually clip out the funny audio clips and I stick them at the end of the episode after the credits. So like this might have to go first, just so everybody knows what they're getting into.
Like,
you know,
people were on the live last night, and like I don't think about it. I just like it's like things you pick up from your parents.
Josh, why? Your mom says butt ton?
Yeah,
Hey.
mom says butt ton.
Like, I literally can't even hear this word. It's the dumbest word I've ever heard.
All right.
no, I could see it. I could see it. I mean, right. I shit ton. Got a shit ton of stuff.
Yeah.
And then, a mom wants to make it a little more appropriate.
Ooh.
She says butt ton.
Butt ton.
I get it.
Uh,
I'm not saying that I'm trying to be the mediator here, because I'm not sure that I would, I'm not sure I want to incorporate butt ton in my vocabulary. All I'm saying is I know where it comes from. The etymology makes sense to me.
That's 100% accurate. I guarantee that's the origin. So it was just a mom trying to do good by her son, and you're hating on it.
Okay, well, moving on.
All right, guys, I've got a butt ton of rapid fire questions for you.